Hello and welcome back to Will's World Reviews and More. This is a review of another wrestling program that I've watched on WWE Network. And this was one that I was really looking forward to. It wasn't one I was planning on watching, but yesterday I kind of got the idea about it, and I had a couple of hours free today, and really enjoyed watching it and recommend it. And of course, this is CM Punk Best in the World. Now, this documentary is from a couple of years ago now. Obviously, it does not figure in everything that's happened since he left, obviously, as well, but also up until a point. So I can find the exact date on this. Well, it's actually 2014, saying it was released, so it must have just been before. Well, it must have been early, maybe at this time last year, I think. But anyway, it was one that was on the network. They've got a whole host of these on there in the section Beyond the Ring. And we're looking forward to catching up on some other ones, including the Paul Heyman one, Stone Cold, and some other ones, maybe Edge. But like I said, this was one that I wanted to watch, especially considering CM Punk's relationship with WWE. I was quite surprised that they'd even done a documentary on him, and we'll get to that later on about, I guess, how that's testament to him and his stickability, or prowess as a wrestler and popularity, that perhaps WWE weren't keen on doing the documentary. And I'll talk about how that's evident in the actual documentary, but nonetheless they did one anyway. So basically, the film is interspersed with kind of like a backstory told by. It starts with you interview Punk directly, and it's interspersed with different things, parts of his current life as this was filmed. So his kind of lifestyle, so his running, his music, his kind of changing food, training other younger or speaking to other younger guys, and just that kind of currentness to it, which is interspersed with interviews of with various people, superstars, producers, friends and family, obviously, and that's kind of tells back his backstory, his past, his history, his early life, etc., etc. So that's what's interesting, is that you kind of get that that feel for it, and you really get an in-depth look into his kind of life. Still trying to figure out exactly when it was released or when it was filmed. I'm assuming it's 2013-14, because at the time of filming, I don't think he's got they got the championship. Where the kind of documentary ends with him winning it at SummerSlam for the first time. But I think that was quite a while before the documentary was filmed, so I think they just kind of skipped out on the later bits for whatever reason. But in general, as a whole, I would really advise watching it, even if you're not a CM Punk fan. Me personally, I am. As I say, I missed pretty much all of his career, because he kind of became properly big in Ring of Honor, or whatever, just as I kind of stopped watching wrestling. So I kind of missed it all and caught up with the buzz or the heat from him walking out, or quitting, or being fired, whatever you want to call it. Pardon me. And that's what kind of interested me afterwards in him. But like I said, the documentary itself is really good. Kind of, I'm a big documentary fan anyway. In general, I'll watch documentaries on anything. But so for this whole section to be on the network about superstars' lives and things, it's really eye opener, and one I'm looking forward to. And I can't really complain too much about it. I don't want to tell you too much, because I'd rather you go and watch it yourselves, because I think it'd be worthwhile, so you can discover and make your own opinions about it. But all I will say is obviously that I really enjoyed it, and just learning about his career, his life, and maybe not having the best family life, and how he kind of used that to his advantage. Started off in his backyard wrestling, worked his way up, always stood by his principles, and that was evident obviously throughout his WWE career. You know, he kept on getting knocked back, but he never gave up, and in the end he left on his terms, and it was never really compromised. You know, people don't like him because he may be arrogant or what have you, but I think he's completely justified in his confidence, and you know, he's someone that I really admire. The documentary focuses on towards the end, obviously, his kind of decision whether he was going to leave or not. Before obviously he left, before he won the championship at SummerSlam, and he said that he spoke to Joey Mercury and is it Lars Frederick from Rancid? I think his name is. And he said he wanted to stay because he wanted to change the business, and that got me thinking about his legacy. You know, what he has, whether that worked. You know, because he stayed for another 3 years after that, and whether he made enough changes to justify staying and not leaving. Maybe on when he was on top. You know, he just won the championship from Cena in his hometown, and it got me thinking. You know, should he have just left then? You know. I think if he'd left then, he probably would have gone to Ring of Honor, back to Ring of Honor, or maybe TNA, which we'll come on to in a minute, which is another one of my, which is one of my gripes with the documentary. And maybe that would have been best for him. But I got to thinking that actually he probably did change the business a bit. I think it was him, or partly him, that has led to NXT being so big. Obviously, you can credit Triple H for that, but I think CM Punk personally was a big inspiration to those guys. You can see on the actual documentary him talking with Dean Ambrose, which I think is somebody that will probably admit Punk paved the way for guys like him and maybe Rollins. I don't think Reigns, because I think Reigns probably is the epitome of what Punk was trying to strive against in some ways. I think himself, you know, he mentioned himself about the Shield, he wasn't keen. Punk has since come out and said that he was one of the main creators of the Shield. He wanted a stable from NXT, and he was originally going to have Chris Hero as that powerhouse instead of Reigns. So that's why I say Reigns, maybe not, because I think, you know, obviously Punk had issues with The Rock, and not to say that would lead to issues with Reigns because of the family tie, but because again it's that whole stereotype, the big guy, you know, the look, the image, the guy perhaps who's in it maybe more for money than anything. But I'm not saying Reigns is in that, but that's the something CM Punk, not CM Punk said, but something Daniel Bryan brought up on the documentary, that a lot of people were there to make money. Not to, like I said, Reigns was, I've talked about it before. Yes, he may not have originally wanted to be a wrestler because he had his American football career, but and that's an issue I have with some wrestlers, is that they kind of prefer to see wrestling as a second option if their first sporting one doesn't work out, whereas guys like Punk and Austin to some extent, and Michaels, always wanted to be wrestlers. But like as I was saying, the legacy, I'm getting off track, the legacy of his staying on, I think it was really helpful to those guys, and I think in the end it was probably going to be worth it. I think he, as much as his departure then became acrimonious because of everything that happened, you know, him being fired on his wedding day, the injuries he supposedly had, you know, walking out after the Rumble, which is making me think, because that was in January, wasn't it, last year? That documentary can't have been, I think it was released on DVD in January 2014, but it must have been filmed beforehand, was filmed beforehand, and then released maybe before, so I'm not quite sure of the dates on it, but I think it was worth it in the end for guys like that, for Ambrose, for Rollins, for Wyatt coming through, and maybe the future like Adrian Neville, or you know, guys like that. So you know, I think in terms of his legacy in WWE, he's left a very decent one, and maybe that decision not to go out then will prove to be difference as WWE goes on. Whether he's changed the business or not, it's difficult to say. But I think he's definitely pushed it in the right direction. Another point I wanted to pick up on was Joey Mercury on this documentary. Now he's someone that's fascinated me as well. He's obviously had his own problems with drugs and alcohol, and how he's rebooted his career as a producer and also on screen now with J&J Security. And obviously in the documentary we find out the revelation that when Joey Mercury was going to lose his house, Punk bought his house for him, which I don't think people would have. I think people knew Punk was a nice guy and everything, but for him to do that kind of dedication, they were best friends as well. But it also proves that that persona that he played sometimes as the villainous straight edge guy who thinks he's better than everyone else is probably not true. He's got his own lifestyle, but he doesn't condemn others. He helps them. Because Joey Mercury couldn't have been more of an opposite, and he helped him. He was best friends with him, roomed with him, travelled with him, and he wasn't stood there being superior. He helped him. So anybody who doesn't like Punk for that reason, just remember that it was a heel character he was playing. The documentary explains that he wanted to be the best heel possible, and that's what he was doing. But as I was saying, Joey Mercury in particular stood out as a really honest witness to Punk. Because the first time you see him, he's not on a lot, but the first time you interview him, he says, "Oh, I didn't really like Punk, but I always respected him because he worked hard." But then obviously you get the second segment interview with him, where he tells him about the story about them being best friends. So if you want an honest opinion, Joey Mercury is there to do that. He's not gonna just praise Punk all the way through. He's gonna tell it straight. So I think that just, again, for people who hating on Punk, saying people might just be biased. There you go. You've got a straight up opinion there, or like an even opinion. Now we get into my kind of like critiques of the documentary. And I say one of them feels like the WWE really wasn't bothered about doing the documentary. It seems like they were forced to because of Punk's popularity. And to be fair, Punk didn't really seem keen on it anyway. He didn't really want to go into his history and his kind of family life. He wasn't bothered. I don't think he's that kind of guy. He even in the documentary says himself about the increased media after he did the pipe bomb, that he wasn't his kind of thing. So I think in terms of the actual documentary being made, I'm glad it was made, but I think it was made purely because of his popularity and maybe to cash in on ratings or DVD sales and obviously network sales now. So, but I'm glad he did. But generally, the people who are speaking about him, I still get the feeling that they don't really view him as the main guy, which I think is insulting to him, because a lot of the people, you can kind of think, you're interviewing him and still thinking, he's not really that good. Or, well, not that good, but he's not as good as he thinks he is. And they're a little bit condescending, and no more than John Cena. This documentary did not endear me any more to him. I have to say, I just don't like him. I really don't like him. Never did. I know I stopped watching it just as he was hitting his kind of stride, but I never liked him, and this documentary didn't do anything else to do that, because two instances, one of them he just came across as being patronising. He was saying, "Ooh, this kid has really got spirit," something like that, something really stupid, and it just really, really irritated me, that. And also, he came across as really arrogant and smug when he was talking about how everyone was talking about Punk, and then he watched one of Punk's matches and was like, "Is that it?" I think he was trying to say that people get hyped up and they can never meet the hype, but to be honest, it just sounded like John Cena was being a bit of a knob, and it really does irritate me, and I am not a fan, as you can probably tell. And I'm not just saying that because I know it's probably cool to hate on John Cena now, and people do it maybe even if they don't really like him, they might not have an opinion, and they just do it because they want to get heat or they want to kind of fit in with everyone. But that's just my opinion. I'm not kind of trying to cause any problems. I just don't like him for those reasons that I've outlined and others. And then hopefully in the future I'll do like a more in-depth video on John Cena and kind of explain myself a bit more, and maybe not to come across as being just as criticising him, because I'm sure he is a good wrestler. There's just things like watching his match with Punk, he just seems a bit wooden sometimes. And again, I'll get into that if I do a video on John Cena. I don't really want to dedicate a whole video to John Cena, but maybe I'll have to, because I'm taking up time on Punk's, which I might do an individual one on him as well. And basically what I was kind of getting at is that contrast with Triple H. You get Cena and you get the feeling that with Cena it's a personal thing against Punk. He just doesn't like him. Maybe it's jealousy, I don't know. But with Triple H you get the feeling it's business. He's honest, gives Punk a lot of credit in the documentary, which is nice. And you feel like the decisions that he may have made against Punk were purely based on a business level, and Triple H, making that transition. And I think Triple H himself may admit he made mistakes with Punk, but he was probably just trying to, like I say, learning the ropes in that transition. The last thing I want to mention is WWE's neglect or decision to not bring TNA, because it goes from basically Punk's lunatic wrestling federation, backyard wrestling, to him joining Ring of Honor and straight to WWE. Now, while he was in Ring of Honor, obviously he also worked for TNA, and the WWE don't mention that at all. And this is in keeping with WWE's decision to not mention TNA. Now, I read earlier on a forum or an article or whatever that someone believes this is because, and I noticed this on the Monday Night War documentary, is that Eric Bischoff said when he knew he was winning in the battle when Vince started belittling the competition of WCW on air. So I think Vince has now opted to ignore all competition because he doesn't feel like they're even competition to him. He doesn't really want to acknowledge their existence because he doesn't even rate them as a viable competition. And I haven't really got an opinion on that, to be honest. Or if I do, then that's another day, another video. But I just thought, for the sake of a documentary, I could understand them not wanting to mention TNA on air on like an actual edition of Raw, SmackDown, or pay-per-view. But for a documentary where people are but people are wanting to know all the facts about the history of a wrestler and maybe don't have the resources to find it out anywhere else, it could have been mentioned. But I do understand the reasons why it wasn't, like I said, because of not wanting to acknowledge the competition. And that's about it, really. I know it's been a long video, but I got quite a lot out of it, really. But in general, I just wanted to say it's a really good documentary, and I'd watch it yourself. Watch this video after you've watched it or before, but whatever you do, make sure you watch the documentary if you can, because it is really worth a watch. And if you don't like Punk, then I think you will have respect for him in the end of it, if nothing else. It might even convert a few people too. So yeah, that's it, guys. We're about 24 hours away from the Rumble. I can't wait. Really going to be exciting. But until then, keep liking, subscribing, and commenting. And thanks for watching. And I'll be back with the Royal Rumble review very soon. So cheers, guys. Thanks.